Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Real Talk NYC Real Estate Podcast with John and Jonathan.
Hey, bud.
Hi, bud. How are you?
I'm okay. How you doing?
I'm great. So today we're going to dive into the favorite topic of commissions, the dreaded word, because inevitably people always think that the real estate broker is what? Overpaid. Hey, that was pretty good. We did not even.
We didn't rehearse that.
No, we did
that
not.
That was first
we
take. Keep it in.
So this podcast is to clarify misconceptions.
We'll kind of talk through
ideas.
How does it work here?
How does it work?
What's
and
what?
How do we get paid? And many times, I think people say, "Oh, all you do is open." Open doors.
I'm so tired of hearing that.
Me too. And if they could be a fly on the wall of our day, they would be frankly surprised at what we will end up doing, and colleagues will end up doing too. Anyway, so let's clarify. So why don't we dive right in?
Well, the first thing I always like to clarify is the nomenclature, right? So we use terms agent and broker kind of interchangeably, but the broker is actually the broker of record. So at the Corcoran Group, where we're at, it's Pam Liebman is the broker of record. She's the leader of the company or the head of the company or whatever. She's the one that sponsors all of the agents that are under the umbrella. An agent is, because there's two different licensures. There's licensed real estate agent and licensed real estate broker. We're both licensed real estate brokers, but then there's a third caveat, which is associate broker, which is what we are, because we do have our brokerage license, which means we could go out and start our own Gasdaska Conlon Team firm if we wanted to, but we choose to be sponsored by a broker, which is Pam Liebman.
Right.
So but we use those terminologies really loosely here in the city. We don't use realtor, interesting enough, because we are not members of the National Association of Realtors, and they have a trademark on the term realtor. So anytime it's kind of a trigger when somebody calls us realtors in the city, they haven't really been doing too much around the city, because no broker in the city or agent in the city uses that term. So
you can tell that they're a newbie.
Yeah, they're a newbie.
All right. So,
but
the point that you're making, which is a very good point, is that the commission is paid to the broker.
Commission is paid to the broker,
Corcoran Group, or to Douglas Elliman, or to Brown Harris Stevens, or Compass.
And ultimately, which is one of the biggest reasons to be sponsored by a brokerage house, is they have errors and omissions, and they have, they have a legal team. They have, so it all trickles down to responsibility as well, which is one of the reasons why you decide to stay with a brokerage house.
Anytime that we as real estate agents or brokers get hired by a prospective seller wanting to sell their apartment, we will discuss with them our fee structure, our listing. We have a listing agreement, just as all the other Real Estate Board of New York firms or independent brokers will have a listing agreement, a standard listing agreement. And in the listing agreement, it will spell out the fee structure.
Yeah.
And in our listing agreement, it would be a 6% commission paid to the Corcoran Group, and then split between the Corcoran Group and the cooperating broker, 3% to the cooperating broker.
Yeah, and REBNY, as you mentioned, the Real Estate Board of New York, which all the big firms are members of, all the agents are members of, that work for big firms, because you have to, by their guidelines, you have to join REBNY and you have to pay your dues, etc. One of their biggest responsibilities is to dictate how agents interact with one another and brokerage firms interact with one another. So one is the divulgence of a new listing going from, say, the Corcoran Group to Douglas Elliman's listing system to Brown Harris Stevens to Compass, etc. So there's the transfer of information, or the transfer of the listing information. And then it's also the co-broke. So co-broke meaning the buyer has a representative and the seller has a representative. Any commissions received have to be split 50-50. At the onset, of course, that can be negotiated, that can be, talked about in the course of a deal and what have you. But the starting point is always split 50-50, which is, 90% of our deals that we do, 95% of the deals that we do, there's always another agent involved, which we'll get into more.
That's correct. So right off the bat, we are, as I said, the standard, or the 6% is stated in a listing agreement. Each home is going to be different. So on average, the commissions will run between 5 and 6% on transactions, depending on depending on the apartment, depending on how expensive the apartment is, etc.
Yeah, and depending on how much work is entailed in it, because
That is correct.
We've talked about many times on our podcast, if it's a job that requires a lot of front end work, well, then the 6% is more justified, even if the price is higher. So if you're having to spend hours and hours to guide a seller and help with logistics on a listing, well, then it's, that should all be taken into account.
Without a doubt. And I do believe, and I'm not just saying this as a real estate broker, but we have had apartments which have taken us a day to sell in our tenure and 3 years to sell. Our time is money. Our counsel, our market expertise, our market track record, and then all of our marketing efforts that we bring to the table, whether it's from a team perspective, servicing the listing, a marketing perspective with regards to everything from staging to negotiating the transaction. What we bring to the table through the Corcoran Group and the Corcoran brand is fully warranted. Our commission is, I stand very, very firmly on that.
Listen, that varies agent to agent. I would say there's plenty of agents out there that don't deserve a full commission because I've dealt with them. You've dealt with them.
Sure.
And they don't know what they're doing. And one of the things one of the descriptive terms or one of the roles that I will say that we do certainly bring to the table is somewhat of an insurance agent. We're an insurance policy from all the pitfalls that you can have. And those pitfalls vary. There's pitfalls with financing and going to a bank.
Sure.
You have somebody that comes in with a pre-approval letter from Rocket Mortgage or Home Loan Depot or something like that, right from the get-go, you're like, let's talk about this, not to put those platforms down or those brokerage down, but that is just on its face. We don't see a lot of that here. So when you go to make an offer and you get a pre-approval letter from Loan Depot or one of these, Rocket Mortgages or one of the many, there's so many of them that is used all the time outside the city, and you see it and you're like, what's your response when you get there? You're like, oh,
not so
okay.
good.
You haven't really done, because it through the board package phase, which is obviously very intricate, and when you get to Park and Fifth Avenue and around the park, even more important to really go with somebody that has experience on that side. But in every case, presentation and making sure that everything is buttoned up, it can be the number one pitfall that we guard against. So, and qualifying buyers, who the buyer is on the listing side.
Very good point. Very good point. So that percentage that the seller is paying to the brokerage house, who is at the forefront of the marketing of the home, they're just not paying the percentage for the agent to create pictures and floor plan and to expose the listing on the internet or whatever marketing efforts the brokerage house brings to the table.
Yeah.
The broker is, I love that expression. That's really good. You didn't even talk to me about that, the insurance policy. I like that. But I think that it is really, really important that, particularly in a cooperative situation, but also in a condominium situation, how often as a listing broker do we have to step in and intercede for the buyer's agent or the buyer's broker to make sure that a board application or this is done or that's done in order to facilitate the transaction. And the seller doesn't realize it, how much goes into what we're doing and monitoring it, because at the bottom line is, whether it's a 5% commission or a 6% commission, we have always erred. We've never let a commission stand in the way of a transaction, and we have always erred on the fiduciary responsibility, the best interest of our sellers. And that's come back to us.
Yes, as you mentioned, the contract for the listing is between the agent, the seller's representative, and the seller, which stipulates the commission. The buyer side many times never knows what the commission is, meaning the buyer themselves. The buyer's agent will know because that's information that we put into our listing system, etc. But it is negotiated between the seller and the seller's agent.
Correct.
And the buyer doesn't have anything really to do with that side of it. So yeah, much like an insurance policy, I would say you don't always use what the insurance policy is needed for. I like nothing more than to go through a transaction where there's no surprises and there's no issues, and we don't have to rely on our 40 plus years of combined knowledge to figure out a problem. But I would ask you one question, which is how many deals does that happen on, percentage wise?
I'd say 0.5%. Okay.
It's very rare.
It would be very rare.
Listen, to the buyer's defense on their thinking, I can do this on my own. Typically, I would say that's almost 99% chance that is a buyer that has either transacted a lot and they have some foot in the real estate world, or they've never bought in the city and they've bought outside the city, where it's just not as complicated as it is here in New York City, and dealing with the co-op world or just the building world and this vertical living. In their defense, they don't know what they don't know. And many times we've done transactions with a direct buyer, and through the process of that, not only do we then count them amongst our clients, because, they come to the realization of all the work that we do, correct, what a buyer's representative will do, because then we have to pick up the ball in terms of those things like the board package and such for the buyer. So they get to see like, oh wow, this transaction, it isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. It's always their response, and not one where, oh yeah, see, anybody can do this.
That's correct. And we've seen that time and time again. So the next part of the commission discussion, I think that's important, is to talk about seller concessions. All right. So I think simply because we've been doing this for a very, very long amount of time, in the beginning of dealing with sellers, I think that agents they're very, very hungry, okay, and they don't want to simply stand up for who they are as a real estate broker, meaning what they bring to the table in terms of the marketing. And so a difficult seller or an aggressive seller who wants them to cut their commission on pay you too much, but whatever, they're going to acquiesce to the seller. And I think just because we're seasoned real estate brokers and we have many, many, many transactions under our belt, we recognize our value. Mm-hmm. And it's important, I think, from the real estate agent's perspective, to defend their fee to the seller. But on the flip side, recognizing that we've had in our tenure many, 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 many sellers that we've done several transactions with, which is great. We're so pleased by that. And acknowledging that a seller who has a personal connection to us, or a seller who we've done many, many deals with, we want to work in the best interest of the seller. And so that will sometimes involve concessions made on our part, but it's always dialogued and it's at our jurisdiction. So you've talked about we as the real estate broker as being the insurance agent for the seller, but also...
Or the buyer.
Or the buyer, exactly. But in terms of how this ties into commission, the real estate transactions in New York City are much more complex in many ways. We are expected as real estate brokers to have a certain knowledge, obviously, not only of what we're doing, but also expertise in being able to handle the complexities of the transaction, the challenges regarding qualifying the buyers, making sure that the applications look their very, very best, and scrutinizing them page by page, but also having a real sense of the marketplace and properly pricing the homes. They're coming to us for our market expertise. So, and we've seen this time and time again when apartments are really grossly mispriced relative to the marketplace. And we do not do that. We always tell the sellers we like to price very close to where we believe that the market will respond to the apartment sale and that it will transact. Now, we have had instances where markets have shifted unbeknownst to us, where the apartment is then, overpriced or underpriced, where we see multiple offers on the table, or there's a languishing and we have to adjust the price. It's not a rocket science.
No.
But yet they're paying our fee. They're expecting us not just to take a pretty picture and put up a floor plan and then collect our fee. That's not what's involved in the transaction.
Yeah, and it's not just about, like you said, it's not an exact science. It is, okay, we use our experience to say, what number do we feel the market's going to respond the best at? And then it's educating our client if it's a seller here, educating the client, the seller, as to how the market does respond. Nobody's going to get it right every time, right?
No.
Could be a little bit off here or there, but our best guess, right, in terms of where we're going to get traffic and hopefully offers.
Right.
But traffic is key, so that then we can translate that to educating our sellers as to, okay, where do we go from here? That's given by feedback on the showings, not just did we get an offer or not, but what are people saying? And of course, we walk through the apartments as a buyer's agent and say, okay, what's wrong with this space? If I was representing a buyer, what am I going to bring to the table on a negotiation with the seller's agent and say, well, this is wrong and that's wrong and this is a little funky and that blah, 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 blah. So we go through our sellers already prepping them for what we think the feedback is going to be. And then we're typically pretty well on the mark there, and we get that feedback and then we relay it to them, and it's educating them to get to a decision point, whether that's a decision point on a negotiation, how to respond to an offer, or reducing the price, or perhaps sometimes we have sellers that they really don't want to stage the apartment. They really don't want to spend the money to do this, that, or the other. And we're just very upfront with them and say, well, okay, but this is what we think is going to happen. And if that happens, maybe the decision is, okay, maybe we do now stage the apartment and revitalize it and blah, blah, blah. You know, so to get to a decision point is key there.
Key. And as you were talking, the whole concept of trust is so important. The sellers are placing their trust in us. And we as real estate brokers are called to keep tabs on the marketing of the home. And when I say that, on a daily basis, you and I will have chats as far as each of our listings, the status of them, where we feel how the market's responding, if the market's not responding, what our position is in all of this, and then being able to intelligently counsel the seller.
You know, because we'll have properties that are very unique that it's not going to draw a huge number of people through the door. So there's really no right answers to how many people can I expect you to show the apartment to within the first week.
That is correct. You could show it to one and the first person comes in and buys it, or we could show it to 50 and nobody's buying it.
It could be a very blanket, like mass appeal 2-bed, 2-bath on the Upper West Side in the 70s that's going to get tons of traffic and tons of people in through the door. Or it could be, ground floor with a spiral staircase in a small non-doorman co-op.
That's correct.
That is in Midtown, and how many people are going to come through that door? So our job is to educate them from the get-go what to expect, and setting expectations.
And continue to counsel them, because we're together through the entire transaction.
So all of this, of course, we talked about the typical percentages for commission, 5 to 6%. Doesn't mean that there's not some concessions that are made sometimes with certain instances that have to make a deal, but it is very few and far between. So people many times think, buyers in particular that are on the fence of even working with an agent think, oh, I'm going to go in without an agent. Then I can get that 3% back that they were going to pay to a buyer's agent.
That's a misconception.
Yeah,
that's not
happening.
Applicable. Yeah.
You're probably a little bit more of a difficult person to deal with. You're uneducated in terms of what needs to happen. So there's a lot of legwork and a lot of setting of expectations on the buyer side in order to even get to see eye to eye with the seller, and to know, and for us to feel confident that you're going to actually perform the way that you need to perform. So there's a picking up of a lot of responsibility for that sort of situation. And it's just, a lot more just logistical work, doing the board package for them, et cetera. Can it be a windfall? Absolutely. Is there windfalls in every single industry on our planet? Absolutely. Are people that are good at what they do, and are they entitled to those windfalls? Yes, I would argue yes. Listen, it's not that we always try to make a deal. We will always work as best we can within the confines that we are given. But the caveat is it's not always up to the agent. It's never up to the agent. Rather, it is up to the brokerage firm. You hired them. You hired the Corcoran Group or Douglas Elliman or Brown Harris Stevens or Compass or Sotheby's. And they're the ones that have to approve any sort of concession. So it is something that is a bit of a myth out there in terms of like, oh, you just go to the broker and just blah, blah,
Right. You bring up very good points. And the last part of this that I think is extremely valuable for anybody who does not have a real estate agent, I concur with you 150%. We work for the sellers, okay? We work for the sellers. And whether it's you're with a subpar agent or you're coming here expecting us to work for you on this and making a bad presentation of yourself, you see, how many times have we counseled sellers and said, based on what this buyer is giving to us, and the way that their aggressiveness or their low bidding, or they're not presenting us with all the details.
Yeah, question marks
around all of them. We would guide you to this buyer and this broker, or versus the buyer that we're getting more money on because we don't work for ourselves.
Yeah. And
we've done that countless times.
And on the flip side,
it's not worth it to us.
On the flip side, I would say, how many
seller.
times are we working with buyers over our 20 years together? Well, 17 years together. But so let's just say 20 years in the business where we're working with a buyer, we get into a bidding situation or a situation where there's another offer already on the table, and we win out partially because that broker knows, and when we present an offer, we present all the pieces of the puzzle, we give them all the information, and they know that we know what we're doing, and that counts in our client's favor.
Many times.
And we do the same thing. If we have 3 offers and two of them, we have no idea who the brokers are, we've never worked with them, they present horrible offers, incomplete offers, etc. They don't know answers to questions. And then we have another agent that we've worked with in the past and they present a very clear and concise offer with all the answers. Sorry, that carries some weight.
Definitely.
So
definitely. At the end of the day,
always something to consider.
We want to try to get the transaction closed.
Yeah. I would say a testament to the importance of our jobs. And this is, it's going to sound self-serving a little bit, but when you look at the percentage of deals that are done for sale by owners, commonly referred to as FSBOs, FSBO, FSBOs, very, very low in our market. I mean, I'm sure it accounts for less than a couple percent, if even that, in our market as a whole. And when you're talking about thousands of transactions or around, let's just pick 1,000 transactions a month or whatever, it's a very, very small number of deals. And that speaks to the relevance of our roles in this industry. It speaks to how important it is to have somebody in your corner, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller. And then on the flip side of that, from the buyer's side, how many transactions are done with only one agent involved? We say 90 to 95% of our deals are done with 2 agents involved. So that in and of itself, to me, statistically, tells you one very important thing, which is the role of the agent in New York City is not going out of style. It's not being replaced by AI.
No.
Like, this is something that only a select few agents out there, I would say 20% of the brokers out there, have the right skills and such to give you the best chance of success. And it's so important because otherwise, why wouldn't there be more FSBOs done? Because sellers know the importance of it. They bought that apartment at some point. They realize the benefit of working with an agent representing them. And buyers know it, saying only 5 or 10% of buyers buy without the use of an agent. But that's a little bit of a misnomer because they are working with an agent. They're working with the seller's agent to complete that transaction. We have yet to have a buyer come in without representation, go to contract, and then know at all what to do from there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They may be good at negotiating and stuff. One can argue they're cutting off their nose to spite their face, but because they don't look through the same lens as a professional real estate agent or broker will do. But that speaks to it just statistically. We would see it more if it wasn't a warranted position. That's my plug for real estate in brokers in general.
And I think it's a great plug. And the last thing that I'd like to say about this before we end this podcast is the following. We are a full service, globally recognized brand started by Barbara Corcoran back in 1983. Right? We stand behind Corcoran's incredible branding, our market outreach, and we are proud to be real estate brokers at the Corcoran Group in New York City, period. So our fee is warranted. Caution when wanting to list one's home with a discount broker, you get what you paid for. And what we've experienced having sellers come to us to sell their apartment, being the second broker on the property, is how poorly they were serviced in terms of the marketing abilities of the discount broker.
Yeah.
That's the end of that. I'm going to say to that.
Goes to the old adage, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
That's correct. And you pay for what you get.
And you pay for what you get. We'll end on that note.
Always a pleasure, bud.
A pleasure. And thank you for joining us, everybody. If you have any questions, as always, reach out to us. You know where to find us.
Thank you for tuning in. Be healthy, safe, and most of all,
remain in gratitude.
See you next time.
Thanks for watching or listening to the Real Talk NYC Real Estate Podcast. If you want to find us online or sign up to get our monthly and quarterly market stats, come on over to our website, GasdaskaConlonTeam.com, or you can find us on all social media with the handle @Gasdaska Conlon Team. If this show was helpful, entertaining, or informative, consider telling friends and family or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our next episode, and we'll see you next time.